Alright, welcome. Today we're actually learning something. So, we're going through a classic game, Boleslavsky versus Lisitsin, 1956. And this is an example of like an old game that isn't that accurate, but just has such great ideas that you can absorb and apply in your own games, which is pretty much the reason why you would want to learn old games. Nowadays, I don't know, these GMs are too good. They don't play instructive but dubious ideas, but Boleslavsky did, so that's why we're looking at this game. So we got a Sicilian, normal stuff. Okay, it's a Sicilian dragon. Yeah, so if you don't know, the idea of going f3 here is that it supports going g4, h4, and it also stops the knight from coming in to harass your bishop. I don't actually know how to draw arrows on this board, so please forgive me. Yeah, anyway, moving on. So castles, here we go, queen d2. Okay, and then Lisitsin took. So it's not that accurate. Like, there's no reason to take. I don't understand why anyone would do that. It just puts Boleslavsky's bishop in the center, and you'll see in a moment there's actually tactical reasons why it's not such a good idea to take. These days, okay, I don't actually know the theory for the dragon, but I believe this is the move. Instead of castling, Boleslavsky castled, because if he castle, then black can do this, d5, and you just get into a really crazy line. Yeah, okay, you don't have to take this pawn, but if you do, jeez, this is such a wild line. So you get the rook, and then they come here, they're threatening mate, and also hitting your queen, so you give up the queen for the other rook, and then you go rook d2, and now white's got 2 rooks and a pawn. Wait, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 2 rooks and a pawn for a queen, which means theoretically white's up 2 points of material. But black's got all these open lines, your king's kind of exposed, so this is actually a little bit better for black. But I mean, this game was played in 1956, they didn't know about this line. So yeah, anyway, Lisitsin took, which we now know is not that great, and he went queen a5. So I suppose his idea was that he wanted to go queen a5 and he wanted to stop the knight from coming to b3 and kicking his queen away. But you'll see with Boleslavsky's next move, that was just kind of silly, it didn't really work. So when Lisitsin went queen a5, he left this pawn hanging, right? The queen was protected, and now it's not protected anymore. So, ooh, wouldn't it be lovely if we could play knight here, attacking the queen and hitting the pawn? And yeah, so after the queen took, we could take here with check and then take back. Unfortunately, that doesn't work right now because the queen's going to take our queen with check. So Boleslavsky went king b1. And now if Lisitsin does, I don't know, something like this, Boleslavsky can do that. Take a pawn with check, and then take the queen. Yeah, so that's not very good. That's why Lisitsin went e5. Which kind of stops that whole idea because now the pawn's not there anymore. But what this does is it leaves this d pawn backwards and really weak, and it also weakens the d5 square. And so now, as soon as Boleslavsky sees that, he's like, okay, my entire game plan is now revolved around those squares on the d file, because they're like major weaknesses, right? So you'll see how he develops that. Okay, he's going a3. He doesn't, if he does something else, there might be some shenanigans here with the queen and the bishop. So he just decides to go a3. And he plays this. So oh my goodness. I keep trying to draw arrows like it's a Lee chessboard, and I just don't know how to do it. So this is just a pretty good move. He plays it because he has a specific idea in mind, but it also just offers a queen trade, which would absolutely favor white. If we get something like this, white's just always going to be better. These squares are just weak on the d file, and white's got a very solid structure. King is closer to the center than black's king. Queen side majority of pawns, which means that they're going to get a passed pawn on the queen side if they play their cards right, which is better than a passed pawn on the king side usually, because it's far away from the king. The king can't come and defend it. Like, this is just a nice endgame for white. So Lisitsin decides not to trade queens, and he goes queen a4 instead. And Boleslavsky plays a super instructive move, which is also a blunder. It's unfortunate. I don't say it's a blunder because it loses a pawn, which it does lose a pawn. That's actually why it's instructive. The reason it's a blunder is that Boleslavsky could have won an exchange instead. Feel free to pause the video for a second and try to figure it out. Instead of going c4, have you got a much better way of playing, which is a little bit obvious, I think. But okay, well, if you found it, congratulations. The move is knight c7. I mean, this is like, when you're looking for tactics, you look at checks, captures, and threats, right? There aren't any checks. There aren't really any captures. I mean, there's taking on d6, but that doesn't seem wise because of the pin. And so this is kind of the only threat. And the problem is, if black protects the rook, then we just do this and the queen's trapped. So yeah, I don't really know what to say. Boleslavsky was a great player, but he just somehow missed this kind of obvious tactic. I mean, I'm glad he did. I'm not complaining. It gives us a really instructive and unique game. Anyway, so c4. Bad move, but also good move. And Lisitsin's like, okay, thanks. Free pawn, I'll take it. Boleslavsky goes back with the knight and takes here. And then he goes bishop g5. And suddenly we see the entire point of his strategy, starting with knight b5 earlier. He's playing against this d5 hole. He's trying to get rid of all the pieces that could have covered the d5 square. So with c4, he forced a trade of light square bishops. Suddenly, if his knight goes there, there isn't a light square bishop to take it. Now, this crucial follow-up, pinning the knight. Okay, the queen goes back and he takes it. And now he goes there, and black doesn't have a single piece that can get rid of this knight. So even though he's down a pawn, and he's probably feeling a bit embarrassed about missing a tactic that could have won some material, white's actually slightly better here, because this knight is just vastly better than this bishop, and this pawn is backwards. I mean, in an endgame we'll win that pawn eventually, so it doesn't really matter that we're down a pawn here. So anyway, the queen goes to h4, which is, I think, a really good move, because white's plan here is, okay, I've secured this incredible knight over here. It's going to help me in attacking black's king. I can do checks on e7 and f6. I can, do stuff over here. It just restricts black's pieces. It creates threats. It's just a good piece. And now my plan at playing white is to just be going g4, h4, h5, throwing these pawns at the king, and trying to get a quick dub. So Lisitsin knows this. Lisitsin is no putter, and he plays queen here. And now the idea is, okay, well, if we go g4 or g3, the queen just goes here. And you cannot get rid of that queen. It's really irritating, actually. The only way you can get rid of it is by bringing your queen to f1 and trading, but then you've got no attack because you've traded queens. So this is actually quite a deep idea from Lisitsin. But Boleslavsky's a really good player, even if he missed a tactic. So he goes queen e2, and now Lisitsin doesn't really have a move, so he just brings his bishop back. And then he goes queen f1. Brilliant idea. Just covering that h3 square so that when he goes g3, the queen can't go there. So now Lisitsin brings a rook in. Okay, so I mean, that's why he played bishop f8 earlier, so that he could bring his rook here without getting forked. I don't know, what else can he really do, I suppose? He's just paralyzed by this incredible knight. So anyway, Boleslavsky does this, and now there's no queen h3 stopping your h-pawn from going. So he goes here, h4. Yeah, taking this pawn would be just folly. It would just be terrible. Like, we could just do this, and now we've got two open files. This rook over here on the d file is coming in. You're just going to get mated like this. I think everyone can just intuitively see that taking that pawn would be dangerous. So he goes to h6 instead. We get g4. And now, I mean, what can he really do? He decides to go g5, which, I mean, it's dubious whether that's actually the best way to defend, but I think he's pretty much toast anyway. So he goes g5, takes some rook here. And now Boleslavsky goes g5. And now we start to see how useful this knight is. Because if you take the rook, oh, can you see the move? Yeah. The knight comes here, forks the king and queen. That's no good. So Lisitsin doesn't do that. He goes h6. And then the rook just takes it. Because, oh, if you take the rook, now there's another fork. You see how powerful that knight is. So, yeah, instead, Lisitsin uses this opportunity to take that pawn. But now the rook just comes back to h5. And again, you still can't take it because of the fork. And Lisitsin just resigns. He just throws in the towel. Why? Because this queen is coming in, the other rook is coming in. It's just over. It really is just mate in a couple of moves. I really don't see how black can defend, and neither did he. That's why he resigned. So this game is instructive because it's all about this d5 hole over here, which actually shows up quite a lot in the Sicilian, in that opening. And it just basically shows how if you can get rid of the light square bishop and also the knights and just leave black with that dark square bishop, then your knight over here is just going to be an absolute monster. It's just going to be unbeatable and you're going to win. So yeah, try apply that idea, try think about holes a little bit. When you see a hole, try think about how can I get rid of the pieces that can defend this hole. And yeah, go play some chess. See ya.